My therapist admitted that she had the intent to manipulate me. I never thought I'd be writing this. Even now, months later, I still wake up some mornings wondering if it was all real, if I somehow misunderstood or exaggerated what happened. But it was real. It happened. And I'm still trying to figure out how to move forward from the wreckage of what was supposed to be my healing. My name is Elena, and I'm 25 years old. For the past 3 years, I was in therapy with a woman I'll call Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She wasn't just my therapist, or at least that's what I thought. She became something else entirely, something I'm still trying to name. Mentor, mother figure, friend, manipulator, all of the above? I don't know anymore. What I do know is that a few months ago, during what would be our final session together, Dr. Mitchell admitted to me that she had the intent to manipulate me. Those were her actual words. And somehow, even after that confession, I left her office with a hug, with confusion, with my heart still desperately clinging to the connection we'd built, even as my mind screamed that something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. This is the story of how I ended up there, and how I'm trying to find my way out of the psychological maze she left me in. I started seeing Dr. Mitchell 3 years ago, when I was 22 and barely holding myself together. I'd been through multiple therapists before her. Some were fine but didn't connect with me. Others were actively harmful in ways I didn't recognize until later. I had what the professionals called complex trauma, a diagnosis that felt both validating and overwhelming. My childhood had been marked by emotional neglect, inconsistent caregiving, and a mother who alternated between smothering attention and cold withdrawal. I developed what attachment theory calls an anxious, preoccupied attachment style, constantly seeking validation and connection while simultaneously fearing abandonment. Dr. Mitchell seemed different from the start. She was warm, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in me as a person, not just as a case file. She was in her early 40s, married, and presented herself as someone who specialized in trauma therapy and attachment work. She told me she was trained in something called relational therapy, which focused on using the therapeutic relationship itself as a tool for healing. At the time, that sounded perfect. I needed to learn how to have healthy relationships, and what better way than to practice with a trained professional in a safe environment. The first year of therapy was intense but felt productive. We talked about my childhood, my patterns in relationships, my fears of abandonment. Dr. Mitchell was patient and seemed to understand me in ways no one else ever had. She would sometimes share small details about her own life. Nothing too personal, but enough to make me feel like we had a real connection. She told me about movies she'd watched, books she'd read, places she'd traveled. It felt special, like she was letting me into her world. Looking back now, I can see how carefully she was building something. But at the time, it just felt like finally being seen. The boundary crossings started small. So small that I didn't even recognize them as boundary crossings at first. About 6 months into our work together, Dr. Mitchell asked if I was on social media. I told her I had an account on a popular platform but didn't use it much. She mentioned that she had an account too, mostly for professional networking. A week later, I got a friend request from her. I remember staring at it on my phone, feeling a flutter of excitement mixed with uncertainty. Was this normal? Should therapists connect with their clients on social media? I accepted the request. I told myself it was fine. She was a professional, she knew what she was doing, and besides, it felt good to have this additional connection to her. I could see photos of her life, her travels, her thoughts on various topics. She would occasionally like my posts or leave brief, encouraging comments. So proud of your progress. Or you're doing amazing. It felt validating. It felt like she really cared. Over the next year, the social media interaction increased. She would send me direct messages between sessions, sometimes just to check in, sometimes to share an article or quote she thought I'd find helpful. The messages became more frequent, more personal. She'd tell me about her day, ask about mine. We'd have conversations that had nothing to do with therapy. I loved it. For someone who'd spent her whole life feeling invisible and unimportant, having this successful, intelligent, caring woman pay attention to me felt like a drug. But drugs have side effects, and this one was no exception. I started to notice that I was thinking about Dr. Mitchell constantly. I'd check my phone obsessively, hoping for a message from her. I'd craft my social media posts with her in mind, wondering what she'd think, hoping she'd comment. I'd count down the days until our next session, and when the session ended, I'd feel a crushing sense of loss that wouldn't lift until I heard from her again. I brought this up in therapy once, about a year and a half into our work. I told her I was worried about how attached I was becoming, how much I thought about her, how painful it was when sessions ended. She smiled warmly and told me this was actually a good sign. This is what we call a corrective emotional experience, and she explained. You're learning what it feels like to have a consistent, caring relationship. Your attachment to me is part of the healing process. We'll work through it together. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was the expert. She had the training, the credentials, the experience. If she said this was normal and therapeutic, then it must be. But the attachment kept growing, and with it, the pain. I started to feel like I couldn't function without her validation. If she didn't respond to a message quickly enough, I'd spiral into anxiety. If she seemed distracted during a session, I'd spend days analyzing every word, every gesture, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. My entire emotional state became dependent on her attention and approval. And she seemed to encourage it. She'd tell me I was special, that our connection was unique, that she didn't have this kind of relationship with her other clients. She'd say things like, "You're not just a client to me, you're someone I genuinely care about." It felt amazing and terrifying at the same time. About 2 years into therapy, something shifted. I started to notice inconsistencies in what Dr. Mitchell told me. She'd mentioned her training in relational therapy multiple times, but when I tried to research the approach to better understand what we were doing, I couldn't find any information that matched what she described. I asked her about it once, and she gave a vague answer about how she'd trained with a specific mentor who had a unique approach. I let it go, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Then there were the comments that felt increasingly inappropriate. She'd compliment my appearance frequently, my hair, my clothes, my smile. At first it felt nice, but over time it started to feel uncomfortable. During one session, she told me I reminded her of a younger version of herself, and that she saw so much potential in me. Another time, she said she wished she'd had someone like herself when she was my age, someone who really understood her. I started to feel like I was being groomed, though I didn't have that language for it at the time. I just knew something felt off, but I couldn't articulate what it was. And every time I tried to bring up my concerns, Dr. Mitchell would redirect the conversation back to my trauma, my attachment issues, my tendency to push people away when I got scared. She'd frame my discomfort as a defense mechanism, something we needed to work through rather than a legitimate concern about our therapeutic relationship. The incident in the park happened about 3 months before everything fell apart. I was walking through a local park on a Saturday afternoon when I heard someone call my name. I turned around and there was Dr. Mitchell, smiling and walking toward me. My heart started racing. Seeing her outside of the therapy office felt surreal and exciting and wrong all at the same time. We chatted for a few minutes about nothing in particular. Then she said something that I've replayed in my mind 1,000 times since. "I watched a movie last night with a beautiful girl in it who reminded me of you." She was just smiling at me, this warm, intense smile that made me feel seen and special and deeply uncomfortable. I didn't know what to say. I mumbled something about needing to get going and practically ran away. For the rest of the weekend, I couldn't stop thinking about that encounter, about the way she'd looked at me, about what she'd meant by that comment. Was it innocent? Was I reading too much into it? Or was there something inappropriate happening that I was too afraid to name? At our next session, I tried to bring it up. "About running into you in the park," I started. She cut me off with a laugh. "Oh, that was such a nice surprise. I love those random encounters. It reminds me that our connection exists outside these 4 walls." I wanted to ask what she meant by that, wanted to express my discomfort, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I nodded and let her change the subject. Over the next few months, I started to realize that I wasn't actually getting better. 3 years of therapy, and I was more anxious, more dependent, more emotionally unstable than when I'd started. I wasn't learning how to have healthy relationships. I was stuck in an increasingly unhealthy one with my therapist, and it was consuming my life. I started reading about therapeutic boundaries, about what was and wasn't appropriate in a therapist-client relationship. Everything I read made my stomach turn. The social media contact, the personal messages, the comments about my appearance, the emphasis on how special our relationship was, these were all red flags. Major red flags. The kind of things that ethical therapists were specifically trained not to do. I felt sick. I felt betrayed. I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. But most of all, I felt trapped. Because despite knowing intellectually that something was wrong, I was still desperately attached to Dr. Mitchell. The thought of ending therapy with her felt like it would destroy me. But I knew I had to do it. I knew I couldn't keep going like this. I spent weeks preparing for what I knew would be our last session. I wrote down everything I wanted to say, all my concerns about boundaries, all the ways I felt our relationship had crossed lines that shouldn't have been crossed. I practiced in front of the mirror, trying to stay calm and clear. I knew she'd try to redirect, to make it about my issues rather than her behavior, and I was determined not to let that happen. The day of the session, I was shaking as I walked into her office. Dr. Mitchell greeted me with her usual warm smile, asked how my week had been. I couldn't do small talk. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. "I need to talk to you about our therapeutic relationship," I said, my voice trembling. "I've been thinking a lot about boundaries, and I'm concerned that we've crossed some lines that aren't appropriate." Her expression shifted immediately. The warmth disappeared, replaced by something I'd never seen before. Defensiveness, maybe even anger. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone sharp. I pulled out my notes, my hands shaking so badly I could barely read them. I went through everything: the social media contact, the personal messages, the comments about my appearance, the encounter in the park, the way she'd told me I was special and different from her other clients. With each point I raised, Dr. Mitchell's expression grew harder. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then she started talking, and what came out of her mouth made me feel like I was losing my mind. She denied everything. Not directly, she was too skilled for that. Instead, she reframed every single concern I'd raised. The social media contact? That was a modern approach to therapy, a way to provide support between sessions. The personal messages? She was just being available to me because she knew how much I struggled with feeling abandoned. The comments about my appearance? She was trying to build my self-esteem, which had been damaged by my mother's criticism. My therapist admitted that she had the intent to manipulate me. I never thought I'd be writing this. Even now, months later, I still wake up some mornings wondering if it really happened or if I somehow imagined the whole thing. But it did happen. My therapist, the person I trusted more than anyone, the person who was supposed to help me heal, admitted that she had the intent to manipulate me. And I still don't know how to process it. My name is Sarah, and I'm 25 years old. I've been in and out of therapy since I was a teenager, trying to work through complex trauma that stems from my childhood. My relationship with my mother was complicated, to say the least. She was emotionally unavailable, sometimes warm and loving, other times cold and distant. I never knew which version of her I'd get on any given day. That inconsistency created an attachment pattern in me that I've struggled with my entire adult life. I'm drawn to mother figures, desperately seeking the nurturing and stability I never had. But I'm also terrified of abandonment and rejection. When I started seeing Dr. Elena Morrison 3 years ago, I thought I'd finally found someone who could help me break this cycle. She was in her mid-40s, warm and engaging, with an easy smile and a way of making me feel seen and understood. She specialized in trauma therapy, or at least that's what she told me. She said she practiced a specific therapeutic modality that focused on reparenting and healing the inner child. It sounded perfect for what I needed. The first few months of therapy were good. Dr. Morrison, she insisted I call her Elena after the first session, which should have been my first red flag, but I was too grateful for the informality to question it. Seemed genuinely interested in my story. She listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and made me feel like I mattered. For someone who'd spent most of her life feeling invisible or like a burden, that attention was intoxicating. "You're so brave for doing this work," she'd tell me at the end of sessions. "Not everyone has the courage to face their trauma the way you do." I'd leave her office feeling validated, seen, important. I started looking forward to our weekly sessions with an intensity that probably should have concerned me. I'd plan what I was going to talk about, rehearse conversations in my head, wonder what she was doing between our appointments. I told myself this was normal, that it was just part of the therapeutic process, that feeling attached to your therapist was a sign that the therapy was working. But looking back now, I can see that the boundaries started blurring almost from the beginning. It started small, Elena mentioning personal details about her life, her husband, her own struggles. Then she started texting me between sessions just to check in and see how I was doing. At first, it felt caring. She was going above and beyond, I thought. She really cared about my well-being. Then she added me on social media. I remember hesitating when I saw the friend request from her personal account. Something felt off about it, but I couldn't articulate why. When I brought it up in our next session, she smiled and said, "I don't believe in rigid boundaries. I think they can actually be harmful, especially for people with attachment trauma. You need to know that I'm a real person who cares about you, not just a therapist you see once a week." It made sense at the time. Or at least I wanted it to make sense. I accepted the friend request. After that, things escalated gradually. She'd comment on my posts, like my photos, send me articles or quotes she thought I'd find meaningful. We'd have long text conversations that had nothing to do with therapy. She'd tell me about her day, her frustrations with other clients, though she never used names, her thoughts on various topics. I felt special, chosen, like I wasn't just another client to her. Our sessions started running long. What was supposed to be 50 minutes would stretch to an hour, sometimes longer. She'd wave away my concerns about her next appointment. "Don't worry about it," she'd say. "You're more important." I was drowning in the attention, and I didn't even realize it. Every text, every like, every extra minute of session time felt like proof that I mattered, that I was worthy of love and care. I'd spent my whole life feeling like I had to earn affection, like I was never quite good enough, and here was someone who seemed to think I was special just for existing. But underneath the gratification, there was a growing unease. We'd been doing therapy for over a year, and I wasn't actually getting better. If anything, I felt more dependent, more anxious, more unable to function without Elena's constant reassurance. I'd panic if she didn't respond to a text within a few hours. I'd obsessively check her social media to see what she was doing. I'd feel jealous when she posted about spending time with friends or family, wondering why she wasn't thinking about me. This wasn't healing. This was something else entirely. I tried to bring it up in session once, about 6 months ago. "I feel like I'm getting more attached to you instead of less," I said carefully. "Is that normal? I thought therapy was supposed to help me become more independent." Elena leaned forward, her expression concerned. "Attachment in therapy is completely normal, Sarah. In fact, it's necessary for healing. You're experiencing what we call a corrective emotional experience. You're learning what it feels like to have a secure attachment to a maternal figure. This is exactly what you need. But I feel like I can't function without talking to you. I check my phone constantly waiting for your messages. I feel anxious when I don't hear from you. That doesn't feel healthy." "That's your trauma talking," she said gently. "Your inner child is finally getting the attention she's always needed. Of course it feels intense, but we'll work through this together. You just need to trust the process." I wanted to trust the process. I wanted to believe that this overwhelming need for her was part of my healing journey. So I pushed down my doubts and kept going. Then, about 4 months ago, something happened that I still can't fully explain. I was at the park near my apartment, sitting on a bench and reading, when I heard someone call my name. I looked up and saw Elena walking toward me, smiling broadly. "Sarah, what a coincidence," she said, sitting down next to me without asking. I was just thinking about you. Oh, I said, surprised and a little uncomfortable. Hi, I didn't know you came to this park. I don't usually, but I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd take a walk. It's such a beautiful day. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You know, I watched a movie last night and the main character reminded me so much of you. She was this beautiful, sensitive young woman trying to find her place in the world. I couldn't stop thinking about how much she looked like you. I felt my face flush. That's nice of you to say. I mean it. You're such a special person, Sarah. I hope you know that. She reached over and squeezed my hand, holding it for just a moment too long. We talked for a few more minutes, though I can barely remember what we said. I was too focused on the strange feeling in my stomach, a mixture of pleasure and discomfort that I couldn't untangle. When she finally left, I sat there for a long time, trying to figure out what had just happened and why it felt so wrong. I started doing research. I looked up therapeutic boundaries, ethical guidelines for therapists, signs of inappropriate therapist behavior. Everything I read made my stomach sink further. The personal relationship outside of sessions, the social media contact, the physical touch, the compliments about my appearance, the excessive availability. These weren't signs of a caring therapist going above and beyond. These were red flags. Major red flags. I felt sick. I felt stupid. How had I not seen this? How had I let it go on for so long? But even as I recognized that something was deeply wrong, I couldn't bring myself to end it. The thought of losing Elena, of losing that connection and attention, was unbearable. She was the only person who'd ever made me feel truly seen and valued. How could I walk away from that? I tried to pull back gradually. I stopped responding to her texts as quickly. I didn't engage as much on social media. In sessions, I tried to keep things more professional, more focused on actual therapeutic work, rather than personal conversations. Elena noticed immediately. You seem distant lately, she said one session. Is everything okay? Have I done something to upset you? No, I've been thinking about boundaries, about whether our relationship is maybe too close for a therapeutic relationship. Her expression shifted, became almost hurt. Sarah, I thought we were past this. I thought you understood that I care about you as a person, not just as a client. Are you saying you want me to be cold and distant? Because I can do that if that's what you want, but I don't think it's what you need. That's not what I'm saying. I just think maybe we should keep things more professional. Maybe not text as much, or... You're pushing me away, she interrupted. This is what you do, Sarah. This is your pattern. Someone gets close to you, shows you real care and affection, and you panic and push them away because you're terrified of being abandoned. But I'm not going to abandon you. I'm not your mother. I'm here for you, but you have to let me in. I felt tears spring to my eyes. She was right, wasn't she? This was my pattern. I was sabotaging the one good relationship I had because I was too damaged to accept love. I'm sorry, I whispered. You're right. I'm sorry. It's okay, she said, her voice softening. I understand. This is hard work, but we'll get through it together. I left that session feeling confused and ashamed. But over the next few weeks, the unease kept growing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong, that I was being manipulated even though I couldn't quite see how. I started reading more about therapeutic abuse, about therapists who exploit their clients' vulnerabilities. I joined online support groups for people who'd experienced boundary violations in therapy. And the more I read, the more I recognized my own experience in their stories. This wasn't therapy. This was exploitation. 2 months ago, I finally decided I had to end it. I was terrified. The thought of losing Elena felt like it would destroy me, but I knew I couldn't keep doing this. I needed real help, real therapy, not whatever this twisted relationship had become. I scheduled what I planned to be my final session. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say 100 times. I was going to be calm, clear, and firm. I was going to thank her for her time, but explain that I needed to find a different therapist. I wasn't going to get into the boundary issues or my concerns about her behavior. I was just going to end it as cleanly as possible. But it didn't go the way I planned. I barely got the words out. I think I need to find a different therapist. Before Elena's expression changed. The warmth disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating that I'd never seen before. Why? She asked sharply. What's brought this on? I just think it's time for a change. I don't feel like I'm making progress. And I think maybe a different approach would be helpful. You don't feel like you're making progress? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sarah, you've made incredible progress. You're so much stronger than when you started. You're able to form attachments now, to trust people. That's huge. But I don't feel stronger. I feel more dependent. I feel like I can't function without constant contact with you, and that doesn't seem healthy. That's not dependence. That's connection. There's a difference. You're finally learning what secure attachment feels like, and it scares you because it's unfamiliar. I don't think our relationship has appropriate boundaries, I said, my voice shaking. The texting, the social media, running into you at the park. Running into you at the park was a coincidence, she interrupted. And as for the rest, I've explained this to you before. I don't believe in rigid boundaries. They're harmful, especially for people with your history. You need to know that I'm a real person who cares about you. But you're my therapist. There should be some boundaries. Says who? Some outdated ethical guidelines written by people who don't understand trauma therapy? Sarah, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what works and what doesn't. And what works for you is knowing that you have someone who genuinely cares about you, who's available when you need them, who sees you as more than just an appointment in their schedule. I felt my resolve wavering. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe, no, I couldn't let her do this again. I took a deep breath. I've been doing research, I said, about therapeutic boundaries and ethical guidelines. And everything I've read says that what we're doing isn't appropriate. The personal relationship, the social media contact, the physical affection, these are all boundary violations. Elena's expression hardened. So you've been reading things on the internet, and now you think you know better than a trained professional? Sarah, you can't believe everything you read online. There are a lot of different approaches to therapy, and what works for one person might not work for another. I've tailored my approach specifically to your needs. But I looked up your credentials, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The therapeutic modality you said you specialized in, you don't have certification in it. I checked the registry. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena stared at me, and for a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Anger, maybe, or fear. Then it was gone, replaced by a look of wounded disappointment. I can't believe you've been investigating me, she said quietly. After everything I've done for you, all the extra time and care I've given you, you've been checking up on me like I'm some kind of criminal? I just wanted to understand. You want to understand? Fine. Let me explain something to you, Sarah. Yes, I don't have formal certification in that specific modality. But I've studied it extensively, I've attended workshops, I've incorporated it into my practice for years. I didn't think I needed a piece of paper to prove that I know what I'm doing. I thought my results spoke for themselves. But you told me you were certified? I said I specialized in it. I never claimed to have formal certification. If you misunderstood, that's not my fault. I felt like I was going crazy. Had she said she was certified? I was almost certain she had, but now I was doubting myself. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe I was making this all up in my head. Look, Elena said, her voice softening. I can see that you're confused and upset, and I understand why. This is a rupture in our therapeutic relationship, and ruptures are actually opportunities for growth. We can work through this together if you're willing to stay and do the work. I don't think I can, I said, tears streaming down my face now. I don't trust this anymore. I don't know what to trust. Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that I still can't fully process. You want to know the truth? Fine, maybe I did have the intent to manipulate you, but... She stopped mid-sentence, like she'd realized she'd said too much. I stared at her, my heart pounding. What? I whispered. What did you just say? What I meant was, she said carefully, in therapy, we sometimes use techniques that could be seen as manipulative by people who don't understand the therapeutic process. We create situations that challenge clients, that push them out of their comfort zones. It's all in service of healing, but to an outsider, it might look like manipulation. That's not what you said. You said you had the intent to manipulate me. You're twisting my words. You're upset and you're not hearing me clearly. What I'm trying to explain is that everything I've done has been to help you. Your inner child is so damaged, Sarah. You needed someone to show you what real care and attention look like. You needed to experience what it feels like to be valued and cherished. That's what I've been trying to give you. By crossing boundaries? By making me dependent on you? By giving you what you needed? Do you think traditional therapy would have helped you? Sitting in a chair once a week, talking about your feelings with someone who remains completely detached? You needed more than that. You needed someone who was willing to really connect with you, to show you that you're worthy of love and attention. I felt like I was drowning. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to accept her explanation and go back to the way things were. But another part of me, a quieter but stronger part, knew that this was wrong. This was all wrong. I can't do this anymore, I said. I need to leave. I stood up, grabbing my bag. Elena stood too, moving toward me. Sarah, please, don't leave like this. We can work through this. This rupture, it's actually a good thing. It's an opportunity for us to deepen our relationship, to build even more trust. If you stay, if you work through this with me, you'll come out stronger on the other side. I need to go, I repeated, moving toward the door. Wait! Elena's voice was urgent now. Just wait. Can I at least hug you, please? I can't let you leave like this. I should have said no. I should have walked out the door. But I was crying, and I was confused, and some part of me still desperately wanted her comfort. So I let her hug me. She pulled me close, holding me tightly. I don't care about boundaries, she whispered into my hair. Not with you. You're such a special person, Sarah. You're not like my other clients. I don't remember the rest of what she said. The hug was too intense, too overwhelming. I felt like I was being pulled underwater, like I couldn't breathe. When she finally let go, I stumbled out of her office without another word. That was 2 months ago. I haven't been back. I haven't responded to her texts or calls. I blocked her on social media. I'm trying to move on, but I don't know how. Because here's the thing. I miss her. I miss her so much it physically hurts. I miss the attention, the validation, the feeling of being special and important. I miss her hugs, her texts, her constant presence in my life. Part of me still believes that she really did care about me, that maybe I overreacted, that maybe I should go back. But another part of me feels disgusted, angry, betrayed. She knew about my attachment issues. She knew about my history with my mother, about how I desperately sought approval and validation from maternal figures. And she used that knowledge to create a relationship that kept me dependent on her, that made me feel like I couldn't survive without her. I've talked to a few friends about what happened, and they were all shocked. That's not normal, they said. That's abuse. But it's hard for me to accept that because nothing overtly inappropriate happened. There was no sexual contact, no explicit manipulation that I can point to and say, this is where she crossed the line. It was all subtle, all wrapped up in language about healing and therapeutic techniques. I've thought about reporting her, but I don't know how. I have no proof of most of what happened. The texts are gone. I deleted them in a moment of panic after our last session. The social media interactions are gone too, since I blocked her. It would be my word against hers, and she's an established professional with 20 years of experience. Who would believe me? And honestly, I'm terrified of what would happen if I tried to report her. In my country, going up against a medical professional is incredibly difficult. The legal system is complicated, expensive, and often favors doctors and therapists. I could end up in a nightmare of legal battles that would drain my finances and mental health even further. And for what? There's no guarantee anything would come of it. So I'm stuck. I'm stuck with these memories, these feelings, this confusion that won't go away. I replay our conversations in my head constantly, trying to figure out what was real and what was manipulation. I dream about her at night. Sometimes good dreams where we're back in her office and everything is okay. Sometimes nightmares where she's chasing me or trapping me or telling me I'm crazy. I feel like I'm going insane. I doubt everything now. My memories, my perceptions, my judgment. If I couldn't see what was happening with Elena, how can I trust myself about anything? How do I know what's real? I've tried to find a new therapist, but I can't bring myself to trust anyone. The thought of sitting in another therapist's office, of being vulnerable with another person who has power over me, makes me feel physically ill. I've started and stopped the process of finding someone new at least a dozen times. My friends tell me I need to move on, to let it go, to focus on healing. But how do I heal from something I can't even fully name? How do I move on when I still don't have answers? Elena never explained what she meant when she said she had the intent to manipulate me. She never acknowledged that what she did was wrong. She just shifted all the responsibility back to me, made it about my trauma and my patterns and my inability to accept love. And the worst part is, sometimes I believe her. Sometimes I think maybe I did overreact. Maybe I am just damaged and unable to accept genuine care. Maybe I ruined the one good therapeutic relationship I had because I'm too broken to recognize love when it's offered to me. But then I remember the research I did. I remember the stories from other people who experienced similar things with their therapists. I remember the sick feeling in my stomach when she said she didn't care about boundaries because I was special. And I know somewhere deep down that what happened wasn't okay. I just wish I knew how to move forward. I wish I had closure or answers or some kind of resolution. Instead, I'm left with this constant rehearsal of conversations in my head, this endless loop of trying to understand what happened and why. No one ever gave me answers in my life. My mother never explained why she was sometimes warm and sometimes cold. My father never explained why he left. And now Elena has left me in the dark too, with half-finished sentences and justifications that don't quite make sense. I'm 25 years old and I feel like I'm back at square one. Actually, worse than square one, because now I have this additional trauma layered on top of everything else. I came to therapy to heal my attachment wounds, and instead, I got a relationship that reinforced every unhealthy pattern I was trying to break. I don't know what I'm looking for by writing this all down. Maybe just to get it out of my head, to see it written down and confirm that it really happened. Maybe to hear from others who've experienced something similar, to know that I'm not alone or crazy. Maybe just to process it in some way, because keeping it locked inside is slowly destroying me. All I know is that I'm tired. I'm tired of doubting myself. I'm tired of missing someone who hurt me. I'm tired of feeling like I'll never be able to trust anyone again. I'm tired of this constant presence in my mind, these unanswered questions that follow me everywhere. I wanted to break my pattern of unhealthy attachments to maternal figures. Instead, I lived through the most intense and damaging version of that pattern I've ever experienced. And I don't know how to move on from that. If you've read this far, thank you. I know it's long and rambling and probably doesn't make complete sense. But this is where I am right now. Confused, hurt, angry, and desperately trying to figure out how to heal from something that was supposed to heal me. I don't have answers. I don't have closure. I don't even have clarity about what exactly happened or whether I'm right to feel the way I do. All I have is this story, these memories, and the hope that somehow, someday, I'll be able to make sense of it all and move forward. But right now, I'm just trying to survive each day without falling apart completely. And some days, that's the best I can do.